My topic tonight for you is about evidence-based management. It is about making decisions on the basis of facts rather than many other ways in which we could make decisions. And so what I want to do is give you a brief overview of this, a book I wrote some years ago called Hard Facts, Dangerous Half-Truths, and Total Nonsense, Profiting from Evidence-Based Management. There is a profound need for the use of evidence in management, as there already is in many of the policy sciences. In criminology, we've learned much about the sentencing and non-sentencing of criminals, at least in the US. Finally, we have learned that at the highest rate of incarceration, that when you sentence too many young drug offenders to jail, what you do is create more crime rather than less. We have learned in education, particularly in Singapore, and particularly in New Zealand, the government of New Zealand has adopted a policy that says you can do nothing in a school without some basis in scientific fact about learning and the theory of learning. We have learned, obviously, in medicine, no one would go to a doctor who did not keep up with the scientific literature. No one would go to a doctor who did not base his or her practice on the science of medicine and the evidence of medicine. But to reprise a story which I am fond of telling, many years ago, I was on the compensation committee of a publicly traded company. We had a compensation consultant. He recommended the use of more stock options for our CEO. I said, do you know about the research on the effect of stock options on behavior? He said no. I said, would you like me to send you some articles about this? And his answer was no. And the sad thing is when I tell this story to my friends in the human resources consulting industry, they all think I'm talking about their firm. So this is not at all unusual. Social policy, particularly in the United Kingdom, beginning under the government of Tony Blair and continuing to the present, has been premised on running experiments and looking at the results of these experiments to found social policy. This has also been tried in the United States, not so well for reasons which we can talk about. However, each of these movements has faced similar obstacles, and tonight I want to talk about this with respect to management. We need evidence-based management because organizations have profound effects on human beings. To take an example that two colleagues and I recently published, in the United States, the workplace and management practices, including layoffs, work-family conflict, absence of job control, too many working hours, and similar types of things, we estimate to be responsible for 120,000 excess deaths in the United States each year, and approximately $200 billion in excess costs. If you look at the data, the world surveys show high levels of employee disengagement, high levels of employee dissatisfaction. The Edelman Trust Index evidences relatively low levels of trust in leaders. And where you work and the conditions under which you work have profound effects on human beings. And so therefore, it is important that we use the best management practices. But of course, we don't. Just as in the US we've learned, with scandals in Atlanta, Chicago, and many other places, that if you give teachers large rewards for student test performance, the test scores will go up. But of course, the simplest way to get the test scores up is to cheat. And there have been many scandals of that. So if you say to me, Jeffrey, on what basis do people make decisions in workplaces, if not on the basis of the evidence? The answer is, of course, what senior leaders have done in the past and what they think has been effective. Their, in quotes, experience. Experience is an interesting teacher, but experience is also the fundamental basis of every magic act known to man. In fact, what a great magician is always doing is relying on your experience to fool you. We rely on, of course, what others are doing. Casual benchmarking. GE does it. Google does it. Apple does it. Stanford does it. So we should do what others are doing. When I talk about evidence-based management, many people think, oh my goodness, I didn't do well in statistics. I don't like math. But evidence-based management is not about statistics or mathematics. It is about fundamentally a way of thinking. First, holding an attitude of wisdom. As the American humorist Nelson Algren once said, what gets us into trouble is not what we don't know, but what we think we know that isn't so. An attitude of wisdom means knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. Trust me, almost none of you will be killed by a doctor who says, I don't know. You will be killed by a doctor who thinks he or she knows and is wrong. If you know what you don't know, there is a chance of learning because you will ask questions. If you think you know more than you know, there is no chance of learning because you will ask no questions. But an attitude of wisdom also means not just saying, I don't know, but acting on the basis of the best available information, understanding that that information is going to become obsolete later. Treat your organization as an unfinished prototype, a scene for continuous learning where you are never complete. And finally, as we've articulated already, build knowledge by reading the management literature. I have a friend who teaches in Scotland. I probably shouldn't have said that, but it's okay. He decided to do a survey of senior leaders in Scotland and asked the following simple question: what had they read? And the answer was, not much. Again, you would not tolerate going to a doctor who said, by the way, I graduated from medical school 20 years ago, and I haven't read anything since. But how many senior leaders are there who have failed to keep up with the relevant science? We should hold them to the same standards. There are 3 ways to practice evidence-based management: develop skill at uncovering assumptions, challenge conventional wisdom, and thirdly, which we're not going to talk much about, avoid the dangerous half-truths of management. When Gary built his culture of evidence-based management, he did several things. First, admit mistakes, beginning with yourself. Second, encourage experimentation. Question conventional wisdom, we've already discussed. And perhaps most importantly, when he came to my class and described his job as CEO of Harrah's, he described it as a job of teaching. If you run an organization of almost any size at all, you cannot make decisions for everybody. You need to teach them how to make better decisions. In that sense, my colleague Rosanas would be a great CEO because he's very good at teaching people how to think, which is, if you think about it, the fundamental job of leadership. What we've done in the past. Memory comes to be a substitute for thinking. So in organizations, I hear all the time, this is a long-standing tradition. We've always done it this way. If doctors continued to treat breast cancer the way they did 40 years ago, the death rate would be much higher. The idea that you would do something solely because you had done it that way in the past makes no sense whatsoever. And the number one problem besetting many CEOs can be fatal. Overconfidence. My merger will work out. I know what to do. Develop skill at uncovering assumptions. Challenge conventional wisdom. Avoid the dangerous half-truths. We've talked about this. Let's talk about uncovering assumptions. Every intervention is predicated on a set of assumptions about people and human behavior. What are those assumptions? Confront those assumptions, particularly the crucial ones, with the evidence and adapt better practices. Standing up. Research shows, believe it or not, and social science has done research on everything. That's what makes us so interesting. I didn't do this research. Research shows that if you have meetings without chairs, in other words, people have to stand up, the meetings will consume 30% less time, and the decision quality will be at least as good, if not better. Simple, simple things. Most of life is simple. And parting thought number 3, the most important diagnostic question. What happens when people fail? Everyone will make mistakes. Everyone is going to have errors. What happens? Medicine talks about forgive and remember. If you are going to get better, you have to have failure. Don't blame, but learn. And the final thing I will tell you is that you should build a philosophy that promotes action. In the words of David Kelly, enlightened trial and error outperforms the planning of flawless intellects. And secondly, fail early and fail often, which is much better than failing once, failing at the end, and failing big. Thank you very much.